The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida. This is Jemmy Legagneur with episode number 12 of People of Florida on the Florida Podcast Network. Our communities are going through a very difficult time right now. So I'm going to be talking to you a bit about being Black. Let's get into it.
John, of course, is one of the famous Ringling Brothers of circus fame.
An ex-lover's revenge foiled.
Just because Phil's homeless doesn't mean he's not a part of the community.
They opened up Sundial Citrus Candies in 1932.
Before we dive into an uncomfortable conversation, I want you first to take a deep breath. The fact that the subject of being Black is even an uncomfortable topic is the exact reason why you need to listen. It's the exact reason why I need to talk. So this is going to be uncomfortable. And that's the point. It can no longer be uncomfortable for only us. We need everyone to have this conversation. So I'm going to welcome you to the table, whoever you are, with some insights from a gentleman named Michael Che. And I promise it's going to be okay for us to all start this off with a little laughter.
We can't agree on anything anymore. As a country, we just can't agree. We just fight about everything. We can't even agree on Black Lives Matter. That's a controversial statement. Black lives matter. Not matters more than you, just matters. Matters. Just matters. That's where we're starting the negotiations. Matters. We can't agree on that shit? What the fuck is less than matters? Black lives exist. Can we say that? Can we say... Is that controversial? We always ask for the lowest common denominator. We ask for the lowest rights. Gays were fighting for equal rights. Equal rights. Could you believe that's an actual stance you could have? You could be for equal rights? That means there's people out there saying, I think everybody should have the same rights as everyone else. And there's other people like, nah, son, I disagree. I just don't think so. Black people was fighting for civil rights, not even equal. Just civil. Can we get civil? I'll take civil rights. Just be civil. Just want civil. Can we get civil? Turn the fucking hose off. Can we just get... They don't tell you Black lives don't matter. That's not what they say. That's not the argument. They hit you with that slick shit. Like, well, all lives matter. Really? Semantics? That would be like if your wife came up to you and was like, do you love me? And you were like, baby, I love everybody. What are you talking about?
So I presumably, like you, have been thinking a lot about Black Lives Matter. What is that phrase? What is that movement? Why is that movement? I woke up writing a few words on Tuesday that I'd like to share with you. You may have seen it, maybe not. But I want you to hear them now. And I want you to read along with me. So what I want you to do is actually go find the post, like pause this episode. If you're not driving or doing something else you should be reading while you're doing it, pause this episode. I'm being serious. And go find the post. It's not hard. It's in the show notes. Okay, I'll put in the show notes for this episode. Or you can go find the social media, any social media. So Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Look up Flintstone Media. Okay, it's at Flintstone Media. I shared it there, but it's in the show notes, so it's super easy. All right, I'll give you a minute. Okay, now we're back. So first, I'm going to just read it all the way through, because I'd really like you to read along with me, and then I'll start from the beginning again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause along the way to give further details and thoughts. But let's just start with let me read it to you. All right, so here we go. I have been so grateful to everyone who's been reaching out. This chapter in history is one that is unfortunately a repeat of so many before it. But this one is different, more of a culmination, and it feels different. And because of that, so many of my beautiful white brothers and sisters have reached out to check up on me. I'm so grateful. The truth is, I've only responded to a fraction of you because it's so painful to talk about. This is different. All of our wounds are open and being salted right now. If I watch the news or think about this for more than a few minutes at a time, I'll lose it. And I literally can't afford to lose it. I still have a business to run, clients and a team to keep happy and well managed, and a son to raise. But this is so monumental and heartbreaking. Its impact is more than I can allow on my heart, soul, and mind without falling apart. So I apologize to all I haven't responded to, or did respond only to rush through a quick conversation. I just can't anymore. Reliving the pain of being followed home as a child, of being forced to fight after being called the N-word. I won, of course. Of having loved ones arrested, being followed in stores. The list goes on. And it all hurts. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm still alive. I'm not rotting behind bars on bogus charges and falsified evidence. I'm lucky. And to all my beautiful white brothers and sisters, you'd never want to spend a day in the skin of this quote unquote lucky girl. Because at the end of the day, George Floyd's murder was a stark reminder to me and my family that we are disposable in some people's eyes. And for no reason that is any different than George Floyd. It can happen to any of us, any day, and at any moment. Imagine the trauma of living with that every day of your life. I love you all. Please be patient as I reach out to respond to everyone. This is different, and it's harder than any other time I've experienced. Racism is a disease, and this country has been horribly infected for centuries, and I'm terrified, both as a woman of color and as a mom to a beautiful mixed boy, that this country doesn't yet deserve to be called his village. I'm heartbroken. So that was my post. Linked in the show notes, image in the show notes as well. So before I go through it and take a deeper dive, I wanted to explain more about my background. I want to tell you a little bit about me, in case you don't really know me yet, just to add some life and context to all of this. So I come from a kaleidoscope of experiences. I'm a daughter of Haitian immigrants. Talk about being hated and ridiculed and mocked in Florida growing up in the 90s. But yeah, that was it. But I went to a private school with mostly white and Jewish people. Right? Went to more bar and bat mitzvahs than I could ever tell you. And I'm probably one of the most comfortable Black people in a room full of white people that you'll ever come across because of having been around white people my entire life. When I went to that private school, first of all, just to explain that, it was because the public schools wanted to hold me back because of my birthday when we moved here. My family wasn't having that. So private school was the only option. We weren't rich, we weren't wealthy. We were audacious. My parents were audacious, and they had a dream, and they weren't going to let anybody tell them that their daughter couldn't be part of that dream or needed to be held back a year from that dream because of her birthday being 9 days too late. So I went to private school, and my parents worked very hard to make that happen every year. And my brother and I we were tokens. I'll just be blunt. We were tokens. We were the only pieces of pepper and a whole table full of salt, guys, for years and years. So I come from a kaleidoscope of experiences. I went to one of the best universities in the country, Tulane, in New Orleans. While I was there, not only did I study my ass off and do quite well for myself academically, pat myself on the back, but I also worked. I had any given time while I was in school, I had 3 to 5 jobs. That's a true thing at the same time, where there was babysitting, being a teacher's assistant, an EMT. Yes, an EMT. I want to stop on that last one for a moment here. When I was in New Orleans for 4 years, I worked as an EMT. And one of the organizations I worked for was the New Orleans Health Department. So through that, and also through a variety of volunteering that I did, I saw a lot. I was opened up to a lot. And then after college, I lived and hung out predominantly in, I won't want to say quote unquote neighborhoods of color. They were just poor neighborhoods. And of course, what do you find a lot of in poor neighborhoods? They're predominantly people of color, just due to all the systemic reasons that has happened that I don't feel like getting into right now. So I've had a kaleidoscope of experiences growing up mostly around white people, but in the skin and heritage that is very despised in this country. So it doesn't matter where I went to school. It doesn't matter where I grew up. It doesn't matter where I hung out when I was 20. It doesn't matter where I volunteered. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. None of it. What do I mean by that? It doesn't matter if I went to a public or private school. If I graduated or if I dropped out, if I smoked crack or sold it or counseled others in addiction therapy. It doesn't matter if I've stolen a bunch of stuff from stores in my past or if I've committed assault. It doesn't matter if I'm so squeaky clean that I don't even have a parking ticket. It doesn't matter. Because the first thing people see, whether they admit it or not, the first thing people see when they see me is the color of my skin. Just like you might also notice the bright pink shirt they have on or the straw hat that they walk into a bar with. It's something you notice. And whether that is a positive thing or a negative thing, it's undeniably the most obvious thing. And this very obvious trait in some people's minds paints me and all Black people as less than, as worthy of suspicion, as criminals, as animals. And don't even get me started on that last part, because if you look up the word lynching in this country, just look it up. You want to see what animals act like. Just look that up. Look at the pictures and then look at the dates on some of those pictures. And I want you to absorb the fact, especially in particular if you're white listening to this, I want you to absorb the fact that when you see those pictures and you see the crowds, it might not be your grandma and grandpa in those pictures, in those crowds, but it's somebody's. And the grandchildren, in some cases, great-grandchildren of the people in those pictures who were themselves acting like animals, but treating us like animals, they are now our coworkers. They are now our fellow parishioners at church. They're the people walking by us in the grocery store. And they're the cops on the street. So we're seen as less than by some people. We're seen as someone to hold power over in one way, shape, or form. And those people have committed the most egregious of atrocities against my people. And every one of those lashes, every one of those lynchings, they are carried and felt on the backs of all of us. So here I am ready to talk about it. And it's important that we do. I got a text the other day from a fellow podcaster, a white guy. He had recently booked a black man in the industry that his podcast covers as a guest, in light of recent events. But he wants to start and have the conversation on his show, but it's uncomfortable for him. And so he reached out to me to honestly express that it's uncomfortable, and also to ask for guidance because he doesn't want to seem like he's been wanting to book this guy for a long time. He doesn't want to seem like he's just being opportunistic, but at the same time, he's like, but I want to be supportive and do the thing that I feel like is right now and have a black voice in this moment. So, he said, there's a part of me that's a little nervous being white and interviewing a black man about situations like these right now. My response? But that's okay. It's an uncomfortable conversation, true, but we are unfortunately uncomfortable every day. And the only way to help that is to have these uncomfortable conversations. And then I offered to chat with him this weekend. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's what I'm doing with this episode. Chatting with you about it. So let's take my words again and really get into the details behind them. Starting with my post from the top. I have been so grateful to everyone who's been reaching out. This chapter in history is one that is unfortunately a repeat of so many before it. So what do I mean? So many before it. Oh my God. To hear a man being asphyxiated and suffocated, screaming and crying out for his mama as best as he can, saying the words, "I can't breathe." George Floyd wasn't the first. He wasn't the first to be executed without proper cause, without justice, without a trial. Executed in the streets, executed amongst others watching passerbys, some supporting, some disgusted but fearing for themselves, some just unsure what to do. He's not the first. He's not the first one that this system has failed. He's not the first one that this system has hunted. He's not the first. Black people in this country, it's gotten to the point where we were so long ago where a black man could be walking down the street, do nothing wrong, but he passes by the wrong person who has some sort of vendetta and takes it out on him and publicly murders him. This has been something that we've seen relegated from the average civilian on the streets behavior to become something where certain classes and groups of people attract racists to join them because there is a power that they possess. And that could be the power of incarceration. That could be the power of the Second Amendment. And that could be civilian or non-civilian. But this has been a repeated story in our history. I'll continue. But this one is different, more of a culmination, and it feels different. So why does it feel different this time? I think there's a lot of reasons why it feels different this time. I think to be grateful for the advancement in our technology, that there's a camera in like everybody's pocket. There's a camera on every street corner. There's a camera even on the uniforms of the officers when they don't turn them off. There are cameras everywhere. But that hasn't helped everybody in the past. I mean, I even saw a video of one of the protesters being pushed down onto the ground, a baton literally brought over by a police officer, put on the ground, and the man's hand forced around it, as if they were trying to create probable cause after the fact. So why is this different? I think it's different because this is the first time where it was damn near impossible for anybody to wiggle in a justification. Anybody. And we've seen people like Eric Gardner. We've seen people like Sandra Bland. We've seen people murdered before. Now, obviously, Sandra Bland's wasn't caught on video, the murder itself. The arrest was. But we've seen this before. But this is different because the racists, as much as they wanted to, couldn't come up with anything to justify the behavior. Now, they've now since tried to, because they're trying to say that, oh, he was a criminal, he was all this, he wasn't. No, that doesn't hold water because he was murdered. None of what he did was a capital crime. And he did his time for what he did do. He was murdered, crying out for help. So the fact that there's very little sunlight in between, in the cracks of this story, in the cracks of that video, the angle of the footage, whatever, to give racists an out and explain it, I think that's part of what's making this so different. Everyone seems more on the same page about this, and I think it's easier, therefore, for people who may have been timid about saying something, even if they've always thought this kind of stuff was wrong. Now they're finally saying something. So I'll continue. And because of that, so many of my beautiful white brothers and sisters have reached out to check up on me, and I'm so grateful. The truth is, I've only responded to a fraction of you because it's so painful to talk about. This is different. All of our wounds are open and being salted right now. So I said a moment ago that all the lynchings, the pain of all of that, it's felt on all of our backs. All those lashes. And the reason that is, just so I can really explain this to you, in case you, because I get it. If you don't walk a day, if you've never been a day in this skin, you just don't get it. So let me explain it. The idea of watching a video where someone is being murdered, ridiculed, beaten, assaulted, harassed, singularly because of a trait that they share with you, a trait that in and of itself is neutral, but has historically had so many evil things applied to it and evil things committed in the name of it, it fucks you up. Being straight, it fucks you up. To know that I'm seen by some people as someone less than human, it fucks you up. And it's so painful for us to talk about this. And I've had a lot of horrible experiences in my life related to my race, unrelated to my race, a lot. Right? Imagine one of the worst experiences of your life, anything, pull from anything in your life, one of the worst experiences of your life. Now imagine the whole entire world knows that you are subject to the fallout of that experience. The whole world knows it, just like the whole world knows that I'm black from just looking at me. Now, imagine that a huge news story breaks related to that experience that you've had, a similar experience. And now everybody who knows that you've had similar experience, this very traumatic thing happened to you in your life, again, recall it. Think about it. Live in it for a second. Go back to that unbelievably horrific thing. Now imagine, out of love, but imagine people calling you, texting you, messaging you every few minutes, again, out of love, but to ask you how you're doing. And I get it. And I welcome it. Like I said, I'm grateful because I see it for what it is. It's love. But unfortunately, what you don't see is it's trauma relived over and over again. I can't escape it. None of us can escape it right now. There's nothing we can do to not think about this. It is so painful to talk about because we all have experienced something related to this. All of us. And so as much as we want to have conversations, and I'm having it right now. I mean, I'm the only one on the mic, but it's painful. So I just want you guys to understand that a little bit better. And I'm not saying don't reach out to people, you know, if you have a black friend, right? I'm not saying don't reach out and see how they are. I'm more saying just like observe how they are, maybe from afar. And then just, if they've put up a post on Facebook or something like that, leave them comments of support. Maybe that they can dip into once in a while en masse, right? But it's so hard, even when it's done out of love, to get that reminder every few minutes. It's painful. But we have to have the conversation. So here we are. All right, I'll keep going. So if I watch the news or think about this for more than a few minutes at a time, I'll lose it. And I literally can't afford to lose it. I still have a business to run, clients and a team to keep happy and well managed, and a son to raise. But this moment is so monumental and heartbreaking, its impact is more than I can allow on my heart, soul, and mind without falling apart. I've been watching these protests, the news. And it's like when I said that our wounds are open and being salted, it's what I'm watching right now is even the people who are trying to stand up for us, whether they're black, whether they're a person of color or not, even the people who are trying to stand up for us are being mocked, ridiculed, beaten, brutalized, arrested. It's heartbreaking. That's the salt. That when you stand up for, like Michael Che said, just civil. We just want y'all to be civil. We want to be treated like we're hoping for equality. Can we start with civil? Like we just want to know that our lives matter. And when people stand up and just say, yeah, like their lives matter, they mean something. they get brutalized. Like Donia Zaire, and I apologize if I'm saying her name right, but Donia Zaire, she was shoved to the ground, smacked her head. Or the 75-year-old longtime activist, Martin Gugino, pushed to the ground. Likely suffered some sort of contusion or something because his brain, something was bleeding. It was all coming out of his ear, not moving, unresponsive. Or, as if that wasn't bad enough, 22-year-old Sean Monterosa shot fatally while on his knees with his hands up. This is just the last few days, and it's because people are standing up for us. Like, it's not bad enough that we know people hate us, but to know that people don't want anybody standing up for us, that's the salt. And that's why it's so hard to watch the news. It's tough to, now that I'm trying to run a business. Like I had a lot of really wonderful milestones that I've been working my ass off for years to reach, kind of all come about in the last couple of months. And I should be celebrating a lot of those. But I'll share something I wrote on, and I'm kind of skipping around posts here, but I'll share something I wrote from, as a comment. A friend of mine posted something, and I commented underneath, and I said, truth be told, I'm exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally. And we all are. And yesterday I found myself angry for a whole new layered reason. It's frankly so unfair that I can't concentrate on work because of the PTSD meant literally that these events are triggering. It's one of the many domino injuries we experience. I'm sick, I'm tired. So that's what I mean. It's hard right now. All right, so I'll continue. I apologize if I haven't responded to, or did respond to rush through a quick conversation, but I just can't anymore. Reliving the pain of being followed home as a child, of being forced to fight after being called the N-word, I won, of course, of having loved ones arrested, being followed in stores, the list goes on, and it all hurts. So let's start with that first one, being followed home as a child. I was about 8 years old. I mean, this is one of many times, but the one that sticks out the most. I was about 8 years old. My brother and I were doing what we did a lot. We were latchkey kids. My parents both worked full time, and we would come home when we get dropped off by the bus. We'd come home, have some chores to do, some homework to do, but we always liked to take our bikes out and run around. But we lived in an all-white gated neighborhood in West Boca. 2 black kids. So like when I say that this happened a lot, it happened a lot. But this one sticks out because we were kind of far into the neighborhood. Our house was towards the front. We had wound our way somewhere in the back when a security officer, a police officer, it was a security person, was called on us. So we had to approach the car, and immediately as we're approaching, I don't know, my brother, I'm sure he was doing the same thing. In my mind, I'm running through the talk. In my head, I was running through the talk. And the talk is something you may have heard of, mentioned before. It's something that Black parents have to give their children. We all do. So there's a wonderful video out there of this one kid, Cameron Welch, about Black rules, about the talk. So I'm going to post that, a link to that in the show notes here. But essentially, it's a list of don'ts. And a lot of it has to do with police officers. And that's what he talks a lot about in the video. You know, what not to do. And that's a lot of what we were thinking about. But the talk really was more than that. It was, I think, one of the main things I remember my dad saying to me during the talk was that, I remember his face. I remember how he was pointing on the table. And he said, some folks, no matter how educated you are or how nice you are to them, will never accept you. Don't be naive to what is often said behind doors, behind your back. And sometimes it's not even being said behind your back. It'll be said in front of your back. I actually shared one of those experiences on an early episode of the show. But the talk, it's one of the most searing memories in a young Black child's brain because it represents a loss of innocence. You know, you think of the talk probably as, you know, the sex talk, right? No. That's its own kind of loss of innocence. This is different. This is an innocence of how you're viewed, and you carry that with you everywhere you go. And as much as I have tried to stay open and approach people openly, it's true. I've been in homes, invited into homes for events and stuff by friends, white friends, and they've had, you know, a lot of family members there, and they don't notice that I'm walking by the room, and I hear that they're saying, I've been in homes with racist people. I've heard what they say when they think I'm not listening. There's a reason why parents have to give the talk. I'll dive into that some other time, I'm sure, more, but that's what we were thinking about when we walked up to that car. That security officer. And he grilled us. What our names were, how old we were, where we lived. He wanted our exact address. We didn't have IDs, of course. We're kids. And then he told us to go home. We weren't going to argue. We are not going to argue. And looking back, I think he was telling us to go home because it was a test. It was his last way of proving whether that we didn't live there. Not whether or not we lived there. I almost said that we didn't live there. Let's be real. So we were walking home with our bikes, rode home with our bikes, and he followed us the entire way. And when we got home, we immediately walked inside the door. We were home alone, 2 kids, by this time scared because we were followed home. And I'll never forget staring out the window. My brother and I staring out the window watching this officer sit there. Watching then a police car roll up. Watching the security guard get out of his car, walk up to the police car, talk, gesture towards the house. That is one of the worst memories of my life because it's when the talk became real. And one of the hardest things about that was the realization I had just the other day that my son is 8. My son is 8. He's the age I was. And when I look at him and how innocent and little and sweet he is, to know that I was like that once. And that I was broken. Because you know that people are seeing you as not belonging, as less than, as subhuman. So that was me being followed home one of many times. What about being forced to fight after being called the N-word? Well, I was after school. Sometimes we did take the bus home. Sometimes we stayed after. My mom would pick us up after she got off of work. And back in the day, there were no after school programs or anything like that. Kids just ran amok on the campus after school. So I was with some kids. I'll never forget. We were playing like a kickball or something like that. Just a few of us goofing off on the field. And I don't know if it was after a play. I don't remember what. My memory starts at the moment I was called the N-word by this kid named Carl. And I lost it. And the buildings at my school were made of bricks. And I took this kid, and he was in my grade, so he was my age. And I took him by the neck, and I slammed him up against this brick wall, feet off the ground. Not like he was hovering feet off the ground. I'm not the Hulk. I mean, his feet were off the ground because that's how hard I was holding him against this wall. And then his brother came around the corner. His big older brother pushed me. I fell on the ground. And then I beat the crap out of both of them. And it felt good. I'm not going to deny it. It felt good. But I was so angry. And there's a pain and an anger that we feel because of the history that is behind that word. Don't say it. Next, having loved ones arrested. You know what? There is nothing more painful than watching a dash cam video of your loved one being put in handcuffs because they were doing XYZ while black. But that's not my story to tell. So but maybe one day you'll hear it, but it's not my story to tell, so it won't come from me. But just know, black people get arrested for no reason. All right, the last one I happen to mention is being followed in stores. Oh, dear God. All the time. Less now, but when I was growing up, especially. You walk in somewhere. First of all, you'd notice how everybody else got greeted. You didn't get greeted. Every other white person that walked in the store, hey, how you do? Welcome to so-and-so. How can I help you? Black person walks in, crickets. But they notice and they follow and they keep their eyes on you and they watch you through clothing racks like cats in a bush just to catch you because they expect it. There's an expectation of being a criminal, of not having the money to buy stuff. In fact, one of the things that Cameron Welch says when he goes through his TikTok on black rules is don't touch stuff in stores you're not buying. I remember that one. I remember hearing that one. So like I said, the list goes on. And it all hurts. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm still alive. I'm not rotting behind bars on bogus charges and falsified evidence. I'm lucky. So, in case you're wondering, and if especially if you do not have black skin, some of these experiences, it might be the first time you're hearing about them, or you might be saying, wow, this is really just something I've never had to think about before. It might be a realization to you about the fact that this is part of our daily thought process. It's in our mind at every moment. We are always having to calculate how we move, how we talk, what we touch, who we look at, where we look. It's a burden on our brains, on our minds, on our emotions. And I'm one of the lucky ones. And I've only scratched the surface, even still with what I've listed, with what's happened to me because I'm Black. That's just a tiny percentage of it. Because there was only so much I was going to sit there and spill out on Facebook. But the next thing I said is so true. To all my beautiful white brothers and sisters, you'd never want to spend a day in the skin of this lucky girl. Because at the end of the day, George Floyd's murder is a stark reminder to me and my family that we are disposable in some people's eyes, and for no reason that is any different than George Floyd. It can happen to us, to any of us, any day and at any moment. Imagine the trauma of living with that every day of your life. When I say that we think about that every moment, we do. Leaving the house, we think about it. Getting in the car, we think about it. Driving to the store, we think about it. And the choice of store we make, we think about it. How we walk into the store, we think about it. Which cashier we walk up to, we think about it. What we're buying at the store, we think about it. What department of the store, what area of the store we go into, we think about it. Who we're talking to, we're thinking about it. Who we're walking with, we're thinking about it. Whether or not we're going to a party, who's going to be there, what's the party about, we're thinking about it. Every moment. We are thinking about, how is my Black skin going to have me treated when I walk out this door and through the next one? So no. As much compassion as you have, and I'm grateful for it, there's not a moment you would wish for it. Not a moment. And it's traumatic and it's heavy. And yet we're supposed to still go on with our daily lives, doing our daily everything, work, entertainment, everything, practicing our faith, going and doing all the normal adulting things. We're supposed to do everything that y'all do with all of this extra burden on ourselves. It's exhausting. So this is different. It's harder than any other time I've experienced. Racism is a disease, and this country has been horribly infected for centuries. I'm terrified, both as a woman of color and as a mom to a beautiful mixed boy, that this country doesn't yet deserve to be called his village. I'm heartbroken. So a lot of people have been reaching out to me to ask me how I'm doing. And I recognize that for many people, both because of how I grew up, because of the industry I am in, because of a million other circumstances, I realize that for many white people, I'm their only Black friend, or one of their only Black friends, or maybe I'm just someone that they know from the mic who won't judge them. And so a lot of people have been reaching out to me, and maybe not just me, hopefully not just me, but they have. So how am I? Well, I'm heartbroken. I don't even know what else to say. I think I've pretty much answered it. You know, I'm angry, I'm tired. One minute I'm hopeful and inspired, and the next minute I'm downtrodden and pissed. Then I'm encouraged, and then I'm on the floor crying, and then I'm figuring out how the hell do I get off the floor because I have shit to do. Like, I'm not okay. I am not okay. Black folks right now are not okay. And I want to say that in particular to anyone who employs Black people, which I hope is everybody who's an employer, right? But just know and please recognize that there is an extra layer of pain being felt right now beyond all the normal shit I've already laid out and explained for you that we deal with every day. Right now, it's heightened beyond measure. And I just hope, however it ends up meaning for you, that you're heightened in awareness and sensitivity right now, in particular for any Black people you have on your staff. It's hard right now. It's hard every day, but especially right now. So how else can white people help? Well, that's another question I've been getting a lot. That's often the first question that people ask me after they ask me how I'm doing. How can people help? Another thing that my kaleidoscope of experiences has allowed me to understand is a couple of reasons why this naivete exists. And it's, again, goes to the heart of the matter. Racism is systemic. And part of that is allowing the history of all of this to be erased as best as those in power have been able to. It's not in our history books. It's not, when we go to history class in this country, we learn literally there's 1 month of it. And then it's MLK, Rosa Parks, maybe some Harriet Tubman, a couple other notable figures, and then we move on. It's a joke what is taught about the truth of what's happened to us in this country. So I understand that because a lot of white people just don't know. They just don't know. It's mind-boggling to me, but y'all just don't know. We know because it's our experience, it's our shared experience. It's passed down at our dinner tables. We talk about it, and it's happening to us still to this day right now. It's every day. It's our experience every day. So we know all this stuff. But I understand that you don't. And I also understand that it can be very difficult when, despite your best intentions, you might want to say something in support of the Black community, but then you end up sometimes feeling chastised because there's a reaction of, well, don't speak for us. Right? So there's this catch-22. And I get that. And I get why people don't want you to speak for us. So again, what do you do? So here's what you do. Lift up our voices. Lift up Black people's voices. Share their posts. Give them the microphone. Ask them questions and have them answer. Don't just speculate and pontificate. Ask Black people to be in the conversation with you. And lift their voices up. And when you see a post on Facebook, on Twitter, or whatever, and you share it, don't just share it. You can comment on it and comment honestly on how it's made you feel or something that it's made you realize or learn. Something that it's opened your eyes to. Educate each other. But use our resources for your facts and your sentiments on our history, on this movement. That's how you can do it. That's what you can do to help. And I've been giving that advice to the few that, like I said, I've had a couple of conversations with people, and there's only so much I could do. It really has been overwhelming and painful. But the couple people who I've been able to pass that message along to already, I've seen them doing that. And I can tell you, it's beautiful and heartwarming. And that's what we need. because too many times our voices are drowned out and we're not heard. So please recognize the privilege that you have, but then use that privilege to raise our voices and help us get heard. That's what we need. So if you have other questions, if you have any questions, right, about this, about anything I've talked about so far, whether it's my own personal experience or the general experience, anything, okay, ask me. Please reach out. I'm open to your questions. So to keep them separate from like all of my regular work stuff, maybe the best way to do that, send them to my FPN email address. So it's Jemmy, Jaime at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Again, that's Jemmy, Jaime at floridapodcastnetwork.com. I'm not sure if I'll be answering them here in the future on this show, replying via email. I don't know. I haven't really thought much through yet, but I will answer one way or another. So I welcome all questions, judgment free. All right. And I really hope that some of this has helped to open your eyes to some things. But I have some homework for you. All right. Listening to this podcast is not enough. Sharing posts is not enough. I want you to do some homework. And it's like the easiest thing you could ever do. Okay. I want you to watch 13th. 13th is on Netflix. It's a Netflix documentary from director Ava DuVernay. And side note, actually watch anything and everything that this woman has created because she's amazing, Ava DuVernay. But yes, start with 13th. It's on Netflix, so you can find it there, but it's also free on YouTube, so there's literally no excuse. Like, this is the easiest thing you can do, and it's free. So there's no excuse. Easiest homework ever. But I'll warn you, it's going to make you uncomfortable. Don't have young children in the room. And if you're at all unsure, watch it first, right? And then watch it with them. With them. And by the way, if you've already watched it, thank you. Seriously, thank you. Now watch it again. Watch it again with eyes and ears that are less stuck in the shock, processing like all of it, and allow yourself to now really watch it. And then once you've watched it, share it. Share it everywhere you can. Okay? Share it with your white friends, most importantly. Links are in the show notes. We need to have more people understand the history. That's, I think, the first thing that has to change. Because if you don't know your history, what do they say? You're what, damned to repeat it, or whatever that phrase is. So please do this one thing. Links are in the show notes. Because listen, I could sit here and I could talk about police brutality and all these other systemic issues. Like, but we're so tired of always having to be the ones to explain the basics of our history. So please, if you are unaware of that history, please, please, please pull up to your computer, your TV, whatever, and find the basics. They may not have been taught to you in public school or wherever you went to school. They may not have been taught in your history classes, but it is our history. And those basic facts are out there. And what might be uncomfortable for you to talk about, and I applaud you for putting an ear to this and listening, especially if it's uncomfortable for you, but it's painful for us. We don't want to talk about it. I'm having a hard time talking to my dad right now. And it's not because I don't want to. Trust me, I've planned to plenty of times. I've even arranged the calls. I just can't. Because talking to my father, my Mufasa, about the abuse, about all of that, like, it's so painful. I know I'm going to cry. I know I'm going to break down. But guess what I can't hear? On top of everything else right now. And I know I'd hear it. I can't hear my father lose it. I can't hear him break down.
maybe after getting some of this out on this recording, maybe I can, but I haven't been able to. I haven't even texted my brother. I can't hear them in pain. But I also realize that if true change is going to happen, we must all lean in. We must all do this together. So I'm hoping that the pain we're all going through to have these conversations is truly worth a damn this time. Because it hasn't felt like it's been worth much for hundreds of years. Those officers who murdered George Floyd, they were finally arrested. Good. But to even call that the tip of the iceberg is laughable. I could take a deep dive and list their names. Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, Philandro Castile. I could talk about being afraid to send your kids outside to play. I can talk about being harassed in public, denied housing or a hotel or a cab. Or I could talk about being black while doing anything. Anything. Having a barbecue, talking on the phone in my grandmother's backyard, sleeping in my own house. Calling the police because I'm in distress and being killed for it. I mean, seriously, it is every damn second of every damn day. And racism intrudes on every facet of our lives. It is systemic. I mean, a man, Christian Cooper, he was bird watching. And a white woman knew that she had the power to turn the tables on him. She knew that all she had to do was call the police. Put on a scared tone in her voice and drop the words African American. And the probability that he would be blamed and be in serious trouble would skyrocket. And she didn't care that it cost him his life, that it could cost him his life, whether through loss of freedom or loss of literal life. She knew. She knew. And she's probably the granddaughter of somebody in one of those lynching photographs I hope you looked up. Because it's generational. It is a cancer on our communities, on our country, and on our world. You may know the name Sandra Bland. I think I even dropped it here once or twice, but she was a black woman who was found hanged in a jail cell in Texas after a traffic stop. I'd like you to hear some of her words. Some of the words that, honestly, likely made her a target. But I'd like you to hear her truth.
Today's Sandy Speaks is going to focus directly on my white people. White people. Yes, black people know that all lives matter. But what I need you guys to understand is that being a black person in America is very, very hard. Although you all love to say, oh, nobody should see race. People are the reason that racism is still alive. Well, what kind of people are the reason? Black racists have no power, whereas white racists do. They have power because they are in positions of control, or they're in positions where they can influence the control over black people. Yes, that is very true. So to my friends who want to get on my videos and they're upset about the picture that I posted, oh well, I will not apologize for it, because at the moment, Black lives matter. They matter. But I want the white folks to really understand out there, black people are truly, we're doing We're doing as much as we can. And we can't help but get pissed off when we see situations where it's clear the black life didn't matter. For those of you questioning why was he running away, well, goddamn. Because in the news that we've seen as of late, you could stand there, surrender to the cops, and still be killed. Plain and simple. And I'm not calling all white people racist, because y'all not. But for the ones who want to get on my page talking about all lives matter, show me in American history where all lives have mattered. Show me where there has been liberty and justice for all. Like that fucking Pledge of Allegiance we love to say. Excuse my French, because Sandy Speaks don't usually cuss. But white people, if all lives mattered, would there need to be a hashtag for Black Lives Mattering? Think about that. Just truly think about that.
So that was Sandra Bland. And her voice was silenced because she was lynched. But in the spirit of the progress the protesters have already created these last few days, and in the eternal hope that we Black folks have with what can be the future, because that's all we've ever had to, it's always we've ever had, hope. We don't know what else to do but to just eternally hope for our future. So I'd like to leave you with the words of George Floyd's 6-year-old daughter, Gianna. She said them after a press conference in Minneapolis the other day, while open-armed and on the shoulders of Stephen Jackson.
That changed the world.
Daddy changed the world.
Daddy changed the world. Such innocence. Such hope. But we can all hope, sweet child. So, let's hope so. For details and show notes about today's episode, please go to peopleoffloridapodcast.com. We have to do better. We must make a better country for my son, for Gianna, and for all the children of this country. Racism is taught. So let's start teaching anti-racism. And that starts by learning the history. The links for everything I've discussed today are in the show notes. And if you have questions about anything on the Black experience, whether discussed today or not, please email me. Again, it's Jemmy, Jaime, at FloridaPodcastNetwork.com. This is only scratching the surface of a massive mountain of issues. And I'm only one perspective from my community of color. But I'd love to let you know my thoughts on anything you have to ask. Open book, judgment free. As always, please follow this show on social media. We found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as FL People Pod. Until next time, people.